So one of the things we attempt to do as a church is to build community. And we focus on finding ways to build community and a sense of connection with those who are a part of the church. But we also, as is a part of our vision right now as a congregation, we also try to find ways to connect with the community outside the walls of our church. And for us to connect with those things that God is doing out there in the community outside the walls of our church. So this is really a big effort of what we try to be as a church, to build community within and to connect with and build community outside the walls of the church. But here's the problem. You know as well as I do, there are a myriad of things that divide us and separate us. So we're at a constant kind of loggerheads with those things that we want to do to draw people together, but also recognizing that in the culture and even in our own understanding of what it means to be community, there are things that pull us apart. I mean, there are things like ideologies, politics that divide us. There are cultural differences. There are racial differences that can divide us. There are socioeconomic things that can cause us to be divided as a people. And all of those things were things that the early church tried to overcome to create a community that would be attractive and would be meaningful for those who found their way into the church, but also to those who were outside the church, so they knew that they were welcomed to be a part of this community that God was creating through the command of Jesus. And so I've been thinking about this, and I actually was preaching on a story that I think illustrated this quite well in Jesus' ministry. And while I was studying for that sermon that I preached a couple weeks ago, I ran across this interesting quote by a Methodist pastor by the name of Nadia Bolz-Weber. And as she was looking at some of the things that divide us within a culture, she said this: our purity systems, even those established with the best of intentions, do not make us holy. They only create insiders and outsiders. In other words, what she was saying is, oftentimes, as we're seeking to be holy and pure people, the standards that we uphold create for us, rather than a sense of forgiveness and grace and understanding and coming together, they create for us those who are inside and those who are outside, those who are pure and those who are impure, those who are righteous and those who are not righteous, those who are labeled sinners. And you know what? That was right there in this passage that I was preaching on from Mark's Gospel, chapter 2, beginning at verse 13. In that, and for those of you who may have heard the sermon, you may remember me preaching on this. In that, we hear of a story of this man named Levi, who was a tax collector, and he was sitting in his tax booth while Jesus was teaching. And as Jesus came along, he said to Levi, "Come, follow me." Meaning, come, be a part of the crowd, be a part of the group. Now, clearly, to many who would have been in that crowd, they would not have seen Levi as an insider. They would have labeled him as an outsider. In fact, the Pharisees very much labeled Levi and his friends as outsiders. Because later that day, after Levi does go and follow Jesus, he invites him to dinner, and while he is eating dinner with Levi and Levi's friends, the Pharisees that are there say to his disciples, and eventually to Jesus through his disciples, "Why do you eat with tax collectors and sinners?" In other words, why are you eating with them rather than eating with us? This us and them mentality was created out of a sense of purity, out of a sense of righteousness, out of a sense of wanting to follow God. The problem was, rather than it moving us towards a place of community where all people are forgiven and all people are made new by God's grace, it moved them towards finding a way to separate some of the bad people out. It was so absolutely against what Jesus was trying to create in their midst. And I think it was hard for many people to understand. And yet that became what the church was about. Rather than focusing so heavily on those things that make us pure and righteous, Jesus had us focusing on those things that made us want to be connected with other humans, with other people, not only with those who are like us, but weren't like us, who are different from us. That's why Paul talks about in letters that he writes to the churches, there is neither Jew nor Greek, male or female, slave or free, because he's trying to say in Christ, in Jesus, we all are in the same family. And yes, we all make mistakes and we all do great things, but we all are part of the same family. It's this creating of community that God has tasked us with as a church and as a people. And we should not allow anything to divide us. Yes, not those things that are often listed as those things that divide, but not even our own sense of purity and holiness should divide us. It needs to help us see that we are all under the umbrella of God's grace. So, it's a challenge, but it's set before us to be a people who are about creating community with all that God puts in our place.